I thought we might tie the American version of Frank Sawyer's Pheasant Tail today.
It uses several materials. I've got a 2X long, 1X heavy nymph hook in the vise. Of course, we've got the pheasant tail, and I've got some strung peacock herl. In order to tie the American version of the pheasant tail, we start out by just starting the thread, and I usually start about an eye length back on the hook, and then just work it back to the end of the shank. This is a size 16 hook, so I'm going to take about 3 or 4 barbs off the pheasant tail. I'm going to pull them out to line up their tip, and then just grab them and snap them off. That leaves the curlies on the end. I like to leave the curlies on this because it'll help me grip a little later on. And then I want to measure this so that the tail comes out somewhere around 2/3 to a half of the length of the shank. Some people tie these really short, other people tie them long. I want to adjust it, and then I want to hold the tail and take about 4 wraps, 3 or 4 wraps away from the tail. At this point, I bend the material back, and then I wrap back over the material to tie-in point of the tail. I'm going to take a piece of wire. In this case, I'm going to use copper wire. This is the same wire that I used on the Sawyer version. And I'm going to tie it in at the tie-in point, and anchor this down to the hook. I'm going to come up about 2/3 of the way up the shank of the hook, which is where I'm going to start the thorax. If you break one of these off, don't worry about it, but you can wind it this way and use your finger to hold it against the back of the hook as you come forward. This is a very thin-bodied fly, doesn't have a lot of taper to it. When you get to where the thorax will start, or about 2/3 of the way up the shank, just take 3 wraps. We want to keep these, meaning we'll take the rib back in the opposite direction. We just wound the material 3 or 4 fairly even wraps up. Helicopter it off as I'm going to do here. And then at this point, I used to try to start the body exactly where I ended, or start the thorax exactly where I ended the body, and that just doesn't work. So I'm going to wrap back and hold back those strands. What I do when I pick out of strung peacock herl is I pick by length, so I'm going to get short ones or I'm going to get long ones. This time I'm going to pick out 3 pieces that are roughly the same length. If I get too many, that's okay too. And then I'm going to get to the bottom here, and I'm just going to cut off to get even. And we'll then tie this in and take the thread back to where we started. Yes, you can wrap the thread around and form, wrap the thread around the peacock herl, and it will reinforce it a little bit. But I don't like the fact that that kind of cords up the peacock herl. I like to keep the barbules facing out. You do want to make this a little more pronounced, a little bigger than the body. And then I like to take 3 turns behind it and a couple of turns in front. Get the tips of my scissors in there and snip it off. Now, ideally, you get to this point with 4 or 6 pieces of peacock herl. We can put 2 legs on either side or 3 legs on either side. I broke one off, so I've only got 3. I'm told, although I don't know my own personal knowledge, that trout can't count. And so I'm going to continue this and just tie these down to the front. Once I have them tied down, I'm going to pull half of them or a couple of them to one side and the rest to the other side. And those are legs. Then I'll pick up my whip finisher and I'll do a 3 or 4 turn whip finish. And then I like to do just a second 3 turn whip finish. At this point, if you want to put a little head cement, I want these cut off roughly even with the back of the thorax. And there's a pheasant tail.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe for all our videos and tight lines.